Today, we're going to be talking about some of the best tips for shorter wide receivers going up against bigger physical DBs and just short wide receivers in general and how they could be more successful on the field. So the first thing I want to talk about is how you could beat a guy who's physical off the line of scrimmage and trying to get hands like a linebacker, strong safety, nickel type defender. And that is going to be by keeping a great pad level off the line of scrimmage and knowing how to make a DB miss laterally. So this is a great example of this from this wide receiver right here. So whenever you got a guy who's up on the line of scrimmage going to get hands, most important thing is your pad level, right? A lot of wide receivers, what they will do is because they're afraid of the contact, they're afraid of this DB jamming, whether it's a one-handed jam, whether it's a two-handed jam, they will stand up and almost be like hesitant with their release. Guys, you need to keep almost a slight forward lean with your body. You need to have a strong base with your lower half. You never want to stand straight up. You don't want your feet too close together because that's the easiest way for this guy to jam and get hands. Because we all know as a shorter wide receiver, what do these linebackers like to do? They like to come down and be physical, try to body us because they're bigger than we are. So we got to make sure that we maintain a good pad level. Now, second thing I mentioned is you want to try to make this DB miss laterally, right? If I got a DB who's lined up on the line of scrimmage, not giving me much room to breathe like this, there is no point in doing a release off the ball where I'm stepping vertical or where I'm attacking this guy and essentially closing the space. This DB has already closed the space for us. Now, if I got a DB who's 2 to 3 yards off and I have to close the space with him, that's a different story. And that's the second example that we're going to look at here from Ladd McConkey in a second. But if that DB is closing the space for us already, we don't need to close the space. We want to make him miss laterally. And as we know, as a shorter wide receiver, DBs love to come down. They love to close the space for us. So doing moves that are almost more like horizontal, this wide receiver is doing something called the split release, where your front foot goes out and your back foot goes up, making contact with the ground at the exact same time. That's how we get separation. Let's maintain my pad level and let's get comfortable making a lateral type release. So that's the first thing that all short wide receivers need to focus on. Good pad level versus press and making sure that you make him miss laterally. Do not need to step vertical. Don't want to absorb contact when we don't have to. So now, what should I do when I have a DB who is 3 to 5 yards off? I'm a shorter wide receiver, and I have to close the space with them, and that's what we're going to look at next. Now, before we get into this, fellas, if you're a wide receiver and you would like to train with us this offseason, fellas, we are coming out to 9 more states across the U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. Next up on our camp tour, you guys, we're going to be coming out to Nashville, then Chicago, Buffalo, Atlanta, Houston, Philly, Detroit, Boise, and Los Angeles. So guys, if you want some more information, want to learn how you can sign up for one of our off-season camps, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd absolutely love to have you out to winning one of these camps. Our camps have available spots, but they will all be gone by the end of this month. So we hope we can see you there. If you guys are local to any one of these states, you guys, check out that very first link in the description below. Let's get back to this video. So now, the second thing that I want you guys to understand is a shorter wide receiver is range with the DB, right? Now, by range, I mean you have to close the space with him, but you don't want to get into his range. Think of it like I'm sure a lot of you guys have ever watched boxing before or like MMA before. You have different UFC fights. They talk a lot about like fighters' reach, right? So the longer the reach you have, the better it is because it's easier for you to close distance. It's easier for you to get hands on whoever you're fighting against. You almost want to think of that as a short wide receiver going up against a DB when you have to close space. We don't want to get into his range, but I still want to close the distance. And this is a great example from Ladd McConkey doing exactly that at the Senior Bowl, right? So this DB's off, like he's sitting at about 5 yards and we have to run this like 10 yard out, right? So our job is to close the space with this DB, try to step on his toes, make him miss. You could attack his leverage to the outside and take an inside release and go. We're going to show an example of that in a second. Or you could close the space. If this DB jumps, you give him a move and just take the outside release, right? But at the end of the day, I have to close the distance with him. Because if he were to run up, and let's say right here, he was going to throw a fake to the inside, and let's say the DB jumped, but we still have to get to 10 yards. He could cut off the angle and meet us at the spot, and that route's locked up. So we have to close the distance with him and try to get to his toes. So when I do make him miss, I can get right past his hip, push up to the depth of the route and give that quarterback space, but also so I could stack and get separation. But when we close the distance as a shorter wide receiver, I got to make sure I leave about a yard of space. That's the range that you want to stay. You want to stay out of his reach. You don't want to let him touch you, but at the end of the day, we still have to close space. Now, why do you not want to let him touch you? If you're a bigger physical wide receiver, you could get right into this guy. You could be physical, but if we're shorter, we're smaller, that's not our game. We are not going to out-physical a linebacker, a strong safety if if we were on the shorter side of things. So if you keep that kind of space between the two of you and you make your move, you're still going to be able to get skinny. You're still going to be able to make him miss, but you're not running into the contact. You're not absorbing all this pointless contact from the DB to knock us off our route. So guys, shorter wide receiver, you have to understand off the line of scrimmage, if they close the space for us, let's make sure I keep a good pad level. Let's make him miss laterally. But second thing, if I got a close space, let's keep that range, keep that reach. Okay, so that's a great example here of this 10-yard out route from Ladd. All right, so now, next example we're going to be talking about is not forcing releases as a shorter wide receiver. The bigger guys can get away with this stuff, especially at the high school level, especially at the middle school level. Not so much at the collegiate level because DBs are getting more and more talented. Definitely not the professional level. But a lot of wide receivers, when they have to run an inside breaking route, so let's say it's a dig, right? Let's say it's just a 10 to 12-yard basic dig. And they have a DB who's lined up like this, about 5 yards, but this DB's inside shade, right? His goal with inside leverage, inside shade, inside leverage, same concept, is to not let us run to the inside. Do not let us run a dig or a slant or a post. Force everything to the outside, which is where the sideline is, which is essentially his help, right? So a lot of receivers who are on the bigger side of things, what they'll do is they'll run at this DB and they force that inside release. They just try to body him and get as physical as they can so they could get on his inside hip, break, and then the ball's right there. Right? Now, as a shorter guy, that's not my game. I will never be able to body a strong safety, a linebacker. Because, guys, if you're on the shorter side of things, smaller side of things, I'm assuming you're out of the slot, right? So what you will see, what you'll get covered a lot by is linebackers, strong safeties, free safeties, nickel defenders, who are usually on the bigger side of things, you guys, and stronger side of things. So if I try to force it, he's going to get hands, and he is going to force me way inside. So when I break on my dig, yeah, he might be on my outside hip, but the quarterback has no room. The spacing of the play is screwed, and there are other defenders to the inside like that, you guys. So what we have to get comfortable doing is I would love to see him attack this guy's leverage, get him to move to the inside and take the outside release. Trust yourself at the top of the route. And that's what short guys have to do. So let's play this thing full speed and then we'll break it down. So he comes off the ball, attacks him, gives him a move, outside release, and you see he loses him. He's able to get separation and get open, but still keep spacing and still keep timing by not absorbing all this hand contact and getting rerouted to the inside because we forced it. Guys, you have to understand why a DB is playing a certain way. There are two things that you want to look for as a receiver when it comes to structuring your route. We're looking at leverage and we're looking at distance. So he's inside leverage and he's maybe about 4 yards away. I got to close the space for like 3.5 because remember, I got to keep that range. And I got to attack him to the inside, right? Let's get him to move inside so I can take a free outside release. You never want to avoid contact, but as a shorter guy, we don't want to take unnecessary contact, right? So he comes off the ball, he attacks him, see how he keeps a little bit of range with this guy. This guy's maybe on a little bit on the bigger side of things, but still keeping a little bit of range. He attacks him, he moves him, takes the free outside release. There is no timing loss with the quarterback here, and there is no spacing loss by us getting rerouted and bullied by a bigger guy. So now at the top of the break, he's able to stack him, which is where this DB is trailing the back hip, gives a move, and we go. Now, let's say he's running right with me, hip to hip, and we can't stack him. I could slip underneath him, but at least I kept spacing on the play. At least I kept timing by not absorbing stupid hand contact that was unnecessary. So this is a textbook dig route here for that inside shade guy. All short wide receivers need to be able to run routes like that. Okay, so now this next example here is going to be from Tyreek Hill, and I know Tyreek Hill is insanely fast. I know he is a tough guy to draw comparisons to because there's not many people that could play like him, right? But guys, honestly, if you're a shorter wide receiver, you got to have some speed. You can't be short and slow. It's a very, very tough sell to any type of coach if you're short and you can't move quickly or fast, or at least have some kind of athleticism to you, right? So this play right here doesn't necessarily require an insane amount of athleticism, but I think it's something that shorter guys need to understand, and that is not being married to a release and letting this DB just body you to the sideline. So Tyreek Hill comes off the ball, and he does this little like slide move to the outside. So you see so many wide receivers do this move, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, Justin Jefferson, where they have a DB who's inside shade press, right? They see it pre-snap, right? This guy's inside shade press. They come off the ball and they do this little shuffle or slide to the outside. DB sits to the inside, then they just take off and go run a fade. You see Justin Jefferson do it a lot on an out route. Same with Keenan Allen. You see Adams always do it on a fade route. They hesitate and then they go. So what if they hesitate and this DB jumps to the outside? As a shorter guy, I can't do that little slide to the outside. This DB jumps and then just try to force it and be married to the release. Guys, press releases are all about having a plan, but also being able to react, especially if you are shorter. So let's play this full speed and watch what Tyreek Hill does. So he slides to the outside. DB jumps to the outside, puts the brakes on, takes the inside release, and is able to win on the fade. I don't recommend this if you're in an offense that runs a lot of MOR fades. MOR means mandatory outside release. Mandatory outside release, you got to force it because sometimes your job is just to get the corner out of there. It's maybe not necessarily you getting the ball every time, right? But if it's not an MOR, let's say it's just like a 4 verticals concept where you don't have a route coming underneath like a 5-yard out or a 10-yard out, you can absolutely do this, right? So he comes off the ball, he slides to the outside. Tyreek Hill's got a ton of speed. He would love to just slide and go beat him to the outside. But if this DB widens and takes it away because he is a smaller dude, I don't know if any of you have ever met him in person before, but was lucky enough to do a camp with this guy one time. He's my size, and I'm not a big dude, right? The only thing he had on me was his legs were probably triple the size of mine, right? But we're the same exact size. And like I said, I am not a big guy. And he's lining up against DBs who are 6'2", 6'3", long, rangy guys. So if he forces it and he gets bodied and this guy gets hands, it's not going to go well for him. He's going to be running pretty much right next to the sideline because he's just simply not as strong as these guys, just not as big, right? Which a lot of you guys watching this are not, going up against DBs, linebackers, etc. So when a guy takes away the release that we have planned, let's be able to react. He just puts the brakes on, he takes the inside release. Let's beat him with speed. Let's keep timing. Let's avoid unnecessary hand contact and get over the top and win on this route. That's a textbook route there from Hill. That's exactly how you guys would react off of those releases. So guys, that slide and go release is a great release for a shorter guy because you can react and you don't need to have and absorb that unnecessary hand contact.